For many yachtsmen, the River Dart is their first experience of West Country cruising. Dartmouth the first port of call after a crossing of Lyme Bay from the Solent or Poole Harbour. This beautiful harbour caters well for boats. Inside a safe entrance there are good facilities, including 2 marinas. Dartmouth itself is no ordinary seaside resort, but an attractive town of narrow streets with many buildings dating back to the 17th century. On the flood tide, the River Dart is navigable for nearly 10 miles inland to Totnes. 15 miles to the southwest of Dartmouth, round the great headland of Start Point, Salcombe is many boat owners' favourite harbour, partly because it is so traditional with no marinas. Another attraction is the line of golden beaches on the eastern shore, opposite the town of Salcombe. At high water, the estuary is navigable inland to Kingsbridge. The River Yam is another traditional yacht harbour, on a smaller scale, as pretty as a picture, though because it is close to Plymouth it can get crowded here in high summer. The village of Newton Ferrers overlooks Newton Creek, which runs into the river. With its good road and rail links to most parts of Britain, Plymouth has become the major yachting port of the West Country, with marinas and moorings for over 2,000 boats. A mile-long breakwater across the middle of Plymouth Sound shelters the harbour from southerly and southwesterly winds. Many of the yachting facilities are close to the Barbican area, one of the city's attractions, along with the famous Plymouth Hoe. Plymouth is also famous for its huge naval dockyard along the eastern shore of the River Tamar in Devonport. Passing under the road and rail bridges, you can sail for several miles inland along the Devon-Cornwall border. The River Dart can be entered at any state of the tide and in any weather, though it can be unpleasantly rough in the entrance in strong southeasterly winds, especially during the ebb tide. Approaching from the east, keep outside the East Blackstone and Mewstone rocks off out of Rowwood Point, and the jagged rocks above and below the surface immediately to the west of them. In settled weather and good visibility, you can pass fairly close to the East Blackstone and the Mewstone, but keep on a heading south of west once you are past them, until the Castle Ledge Green Buoy comes into line with a row of white cottages on the hill behind. After leaving the buoy to starboard, you can head in for the entrance, now clearly indicated by the houses climbing up the slopes on either side. From the west, begin your approach from off Start Point Lighthouse, 8 miles away. In all but settled weather, you should keep 3 miles south of Start Point to avoid the nasty tidal race that builds up off it. The Daymark beacon on top of the hill immediately to the east of the entrance is a useful landmark from the south and west. Head towards it, leaving the Homestone Ledge buoy to port before turning in towards the entrance. Kingswear Castle on the east side of the narrow entrance once helped protect the river from marauders. When enemy ships were sighted, a chain would be raised across the mouth of the river between here and Dartmouth Castle on the western shore. The castle's guns and the chain have long gone. Today's marauders, mostly in yachts and motor cruisers, are given a friendlier welcome. By night, this light beacon shines a white sector over the safe approaches to the river. Just inside the entrance, the river puts in a bend, protecting the main harbour beyond from wind and swell. The town of Kingswear rises up the eastern shore. Warfleet Cove on the west side looks enticing, but is shallow, drying out at low water. Beyond it, Dartmouth's splendid waterfront comes into view. Watch out for the little ferry that scuttles back and forth across the river between Dartmouth and Kingswear. This is the lower of the 2 car ferries in the harbour, the only means of crossing the river by car below Totnes. In Kingswear, the town centre is fairly small, with just a few shops, pubs and restaurants. But this will be many visiting yachtsmen's first contact with the land, because it is here that the harbour's largest marina is situated. Darthaven Marina has pontoon berths for close to 300 boats, with all the usual facilities. Their modern hoist can lift boats of up to 30 tons into and out of the water. For the bright lights of Dartmouth, you can simply hop onto a ferry. They run until late in the evening. In Dartmouth, visiting boats may be able to berth alongside the inside of the floating town jetty. During the day, you can only go along the outside to pick up or put down crew. You can only moor on the outside between 5 p.m. and 8:30 a.m. At other times, it is busy with the many trip boats that carry holidaymakers on scenic trips up and down the river. In high summer, the traffic can be very heavy. However you arrive in Dartmouth, give yourself plenty of time to wander around this delightful town and treat yourself to a meal in one of its many restaurants. Some of the buildings in Dartmouth date back to the 17th century. Some show the strain of their great age. Behind the main shopping street, the town climbs steeply up the hill. Opportunities here for stretching the leg muscles after a long sea passage. Bayard's Cove attracts the tourists, not because this waterside street witnessed the Pilgrim Fathers, who put in here before setting off across the Atlantic, for the ruins of a castle built by Henry VIII, but because scenes from the 1970s TV series The Aeneid Line were filmed here. The town's miniature harbour, fully occupied by local boats, is called the boat float, which is not entirely appropriate as it dries out at low water. Access to the river is through a low and narrow bridge under the embankment. Carry on a short way upstream from the jetty, past some of the many moorings in the harbour, and you come to Dart Marina, on the west bank just past the hire ferry. This distinctive paddle wheel vessel runs on wires that it picks up from the riverbed as it moves. Keep well clear of it. The ferry carries cars and foot passengers across to the west shore, along which the steam haul train from Paynton to Kingswear runs, several times a day in the summer. Dart Marina is one of the oldest in the country, but has modern pontoon berths and facilities. It's only 5 minutes walk from here into the centre of Dartmouth. Heading upriver again, you quickly leave the town behind and are sailing between lush green fields and woodland. Old Mill Creek runs in from the left, only navigable towards high water. On the east shore, the greenery is interrupted by the old established boatyard of Philip & Son, which incorporates Kingswear Marina, purely for permanent berth holders. The yard undertakes repair work on private and commercial craft. Don't forget that throughout the harbour and up the river there's a 6-knot speed limit. The river is navigable at all states of the tide up to the village of Dittisham. You may be lucky and find a vacant visitor's mooring buoy amongst all the boats moored here. The ferry boat inn at Dittisham is a popular watering hole for yachtsmen. Upstream of Dittisham, the river becomes dramatically shallower, and you should only proceed on the last half of the flood tide. You will need a chart that shows the upper river at a larger scale, and you will have to keep a sharp lookout for the buoys and beacons that mark the deep water channels. Besides a few waterside houses, there are no human encroachments on the way up to Totnes, the river winding its way through some beautiful countryside. You get a good view of St Mary's Church in Totnes a couple of miles before you reach the town. In the final narrow reach up to Totnes, you must slow right down to avoid making any wash. As long as you do so, the welcome you will get from the harbour patrol will be friendly.
There's a big steamer coming down, just watch it.
Pass on the wrong side.
Yeah. No, I should pass them on the right side if I was you. They get a bit funny else.
At Baltic Wharf, ships of up to 1,000 tons unload their cargoes of timber. The trip boats leave little room for manoeuvre in this stretch. Passengers embark and disembark from the Riverside Cafe on the east bank. On the opposite side of the river, the steam packet inn makes visiting boat crews very welcome. You can berth immediately outside it or just upstream against the wall. The south end of our island is the effective head of navigation, though a few small local boats do more up the narrow channels on either side. Unless your boat can take the ground, you must be away back downstream soon after the tide starts to ebb. But try to allow time to walk into the town, which has some of the most elegant buildings of any market town in the country. The busy High Street has good shops and restaurants. The Eastgate Arch across the High Street was rebuilt in 1990 after a fire. Gull Point marks the approach to Salcombe from the east. Just inside the point is the wreck of the Demetrios, a 10,000-ton cargo ship that ran aground here in December 1992. From here, head well to the south of the entrance to avoid the shallowest part of Salcombe Bar. The bar can be dangerous in strong southerly winds against an ebb tide. From the west, you must round Bolt Head and the Great and Little Mewstone Rocks off it, before turning to the north towards the entrance. To enter the harbour, line up the leading marks, a red and white pole close to the shore, and a white pole with a red and white diamond top mark on the hill behind. And don't forget to observe the speed limit. Navigation up the harbour to the main mooring area is straightforward. What hazards there are clearly marked by starboard and port beacons. Along the eastern shore of the river are a series of sandy beaches. You can anchor off them, but beware the strong tide, up to 2.5 knots on the ebb. Most visiting boats pick up one of the visitors' mooring buoys off Salcombe on the opposite shore. You will normally be met by one of the Harbour Authority's patrol boats and directed to a suitable mooring. Larger craft or short-handed boats will be helped to moor up. You will be visited again later and asked for your mooring fee. In the summer there are a lot of boats to be directed and a lot of fees to collect. Salcombe is deservedly one of the most popular harbours in the West Country. It is busy with all kinds of small craft. The easiest way to get ashore is in the water taxi, which can be called on VHF Channel 12. You can moor for up to an hour only alongside the visitors' pontoon off the White Strand, which can be handy if you just want to go ashore for some shopping or a quick drink and a meal. There are pubs and restaurants close by, but go steady on the drink. The ramp down to the pontoon is pretty steep, at low water anyway. In the summer, the town of Salcombe is crowded with holidaymakers, landlubbers as well as yachtsmen, but it lives up to its reputation as a rather classy resort. You can't penetrate as far inland up the Salcombe estuary as you can up the Dart, but with several creeks there's plenty of sheltered water, at least at high tide, offering opportunities for dinghy exploration. Cruising boats can head up the main channel, first of all into an area known as the Bag, where there are more moorings, offering better shelter in southerly winds than those in the main harbour. The admirable Island Cruising Club, which must have introduced more people to sailing than any other single organisation, has its accommodation vessel here, an ex-Mersey ferry. Above the Bag you can navigate a further 3 miles up to Kingsbridge, but only on the last of the flood tide. The channel is marked by beacons and buoys, but in places you need keen eyes to pick out the next marks. The outskirts of Kingsbridge appear quite soon, along with a number of private moorings, but the channel swings across to the other side of the river before turning back again to the Kingsbridge shore. There are a number of quayside moorings in the town, and towards the upper end of the quay there is usually space for visiting boats. As long as you buy a drink or two there, or a meal, you can moor outside the Crabshell Inn. But as at Totnes, you must be prepared to dry out in soft mud if you're staying for more than an hour or two. To avoid the rocks on either side of Wembury Bay in the approaches to the River Yam, head for the church on the hillside on a course between 010 and 040 degrees true. The entrance to the river lies over on the east side of the bay. You should be able to pick out the leading marks from some distance off. If you line up the 2 white triangles up on the hill behind the entrance, you will be on a course for the end of the sandbar by a small red buoy, which should be left close to port. Once through the narrow gap between the buoy and the rocky shore, you must swing to port. To continue up the river, keep in the deepest water by holding a course between the red and white board high up on the north shore ahead of you, and, astern, a beacon with a green triangle on a white board. Once you can see clearly up the river to starboard, you can turn to follow its course. This strange raft is one of a number on the river used by international paints to test new anti-fouling. Most of the moorings are on the broad bend of the river known as Yam Pool. There are a number of clearly labelled visitors' buoys and an isolated pontoon along which boats raft up, 5 or 6 abreast at busy times. With no water taxi service, a dinghy is an essential item if you want to get ashore. The best place to land is at the dinghy pontoons on the point below the prominent Yam Hotel. Cruising boats can lie alongside the end of the pontoon for short periods, just to pick up or land crew or to take on water. Harbour Master Michael Simpson regularly patrols the moorings in his launch every morning and again late in the afternoon, and he will visit you in due course to collect your mooring fee.
Single line?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, thank you. If people come in, if they haven't phoned you beforehand, the procedure is just to pick up a...
You can either pick up a visitor's mooring or an empty residence mooring. If it has no tender on it, it's open for the side. We make that a condition of having a mooring.
And what about the pontoon? You can go along the pontoon if there's space. Thanks very much.
The river is navigable for over a mile above Yam Pool, past more private moorings and between steep and densely wooded shores. Beyond Steer Point, where the river divides into Yampton Creek and Coughleet Creek, the water becomes very shallow and almost totally disappears at low water. At and around high water, a canoe, or a dinghy, is in its element up here. Newton Creek takes its name from Newton Ferrers, the village that runs along its north bank, opposite its sister village of Nos Mayo. The creek dries out at low water. Near the head of the creek is the Bridgend Boat Company, a small but friendly boatyard that can undertake most kinds of repair work. Bridgend also fit out GRP hulls and build a range of pretty coal-moulded sailing dinghies. The wedge-shaped Mewstone at the western end of Wembury Bay marks both the approach to the Yam from the west and to Plymouth Harbour from the east. For the latter, leave it well to starboard before heading into Plymouth Sound. Further into the Sound, you must also pass outside the Shagstone Rock off Rennie Point. It is marked by an unlit beacon. From here, the shortest way into Plymouth is through the Eastern Channel, between the east end of the breakwater and the imposing Fort Bovisand. The mile-long breakwater has been sheltering Plymouth Sound since 1841. Its construction was a major feat of marine engineering, taking over 25 years and requiring 4 million tons of limestone and 3 million tons of granite. The western channel is the main entrance into the Sound, being wider and deeper, and this end of the breakwater having the larger, more powerful lighthouse. At night or in bad weather, this is the better way in, even if you have come from the east. Right over on the west side of the Sound, Cawsand Bay is a popular anchorage in westerly or southwesterly winds. On fine summer weekends, Plymouth mariners disgorge their customers, and most of them seem to come here, dropping their hooks off the twin villages of Cawsand and Kingsand, with their respective beaches. Once inside the breakwater, the waterfront of Plymouth Hoe comes into view, Smeaton's Tower amongst its many landmarks. 3 of Plymouth's marinas are on the eastern side of the harbour, past the end of Mountbatten Breakwater, in the entrance to the area known as the Catwater. The nearest of these is Queen Anne's Battery Marina, a short way up the Sutton Channel. QAB, for short, has a good range of facilities, both afloat and ashore, in its modern buildings. The marina is a mile by road from the centre of Plymouth, but a ferry runs across to the area of the city. The Sutton Channel leads into Sutton Harbour, with another marina and the port's main fish quays. By the time this video is completed, a new 24-hour lock should be in operation, keeping the water in Sutton Harbour up to half-tide level or higher. This should add to the attractions of the surrounding Barbican district, one of the few areas of the old city that survived the bombing raids of World War II. Sutton Harbour Marina is not quite as sophisticated as QAB, most of the facilities you would expect, and the only marina in Plymouth close to the centre. The highest of the several structures that we saw on Plymouth Hoe is the city's War Memorial. Nearby is a statue to Plymouth's eminent son, Sir Francis Drake, who set sail from the harbour on his voyage round the world and again to defeat the Spanish Armada. Smeaton's Tower was once a working lighthouse out on the Eddystone Rock 10 miles south of Plymouth Sound. When it threatened to fall down, it was rebuilt here on the Hoe. Drake was famous for the game of bowls he finished before setting out to tackle the Armada. Today, the game is still played in the shadow of his statue. Even if war memorials, statues and redundant lighthouses don't interest you, you should visit the Hoe for the splendid view you get over Plymouth Sound. Looking to the east, you can see the Mountbatten Breakwater, protecting the entrance to the Catwater, and look up the Catwater itself. If you carry on past the entrance to Sutton Harbour and Queen Anne's Battery Marina, you can navigate a short way up the Catwater, which is really the mouth of the River Plym. On the south shore lies Clovelly Bay Marina. Bearing in mind that Plymouth Breakwater is over 2 miles away, you realise when you see it from the Hoe what an impressive structure it is, and how it transformed the Sound from a wide, exposed stretch of water into a safe harbour. Most shipping, including the ferries to and from Brittany and northern Spain, use the larger western channel past the breakwater, before rounding Drake's Island with its distinctive fortifications and heading for the Mill Bay docks, or through the Narrow to the area known as the Hamoaze and up the River Tamar. Local boats heading for the Narrows often take a short cut between Drake's Island and the opposite shore, through a very narrow channel called the Bridge. This is marked by port and starboard buoys, but can be dangerous, with the tide running at up to 2.5 knots and only 2 meters depth at low water springs. Without local knowledge, it is probably best to follow the main channel round Drake's Island, past Mill Bay, where the ferries dock. If there's a ship coming through the Narrows, hang back until it's clear. Otherwise they present no problems, though watch out for tidal swirls. Immediately through the Narrows, the Mayflower International Marina comes into sight on the starboard hand. This marina is a little way from the city centre, but the facilities ashore are excellent, including a restaurant and what must be the best toilet and shower block in the country. Right next door to the marina, Marine Projects have the factory where they build their Princess motor yachts. They regularly pass by en route to and from their sea trials. By way of contrast, over on the other shore from the marina, lies a traditional boatyard of Mashford Brothers, famous for the building and repair of wooden yachts. Many single-handed yachtsmen have fitted their boats out here before setting off across the Atlantic or round the world. The Devonport Naval Dockyard runs up the eastern side of the Hamoaze. Give a wide berth to the chain ferries that run across to Tor on the Cornish shore. The modern and clearly busy dockyard is a reassuring sight to anyone who thinks the Royal Navy has been run down beyond effectiveness. Upstream of Devonport, the Tamar is still wide and deep. For much of the river there are lines of large ships' mooring buoys. Steer well clear of them. Coming in from the Cornish shore, the St. Germans or Liner River is navigable on the flood tide, up to some secluded deep-water anchorages, beyond the Naval School of Seamanship and its row of identical sailing yachts. Back on the Tamar, high-level rail and road bridges dominate the view upstream. Isambard Kingdom Brunel's magnificent tubular arch railway bridge and the A38 suspension bridge behind it. Saltash on the Cornish side of the river has a number of private moorings and a quay where you can go alongside at high water for a refreshment in the nearby pub. There's no shortage of headroom underneath the bridges. The lower of the two, the railway bridge, is 30 metres above the high water mark. For another mile, the river is still deep and wide, past a row of moored ammunition barges, but then it shallows. Wait until at least a couple of hours after low water before proceeding, and keep a sharp lookout for the buoys and beacons that mark the now tortuous channel. A further mile up the river, the village of Carr Green runs right down to the western shore. The Spaniards Inn is worth a visit. If there's room, you can go alongside the quay close to it. Further upstream and on the eastern shore are a clutch of deep water moorings laid and maintained by Weir Quay Boatyard. Visitors can usually be accommodated. Besides its repair and winter storage facilities, the yard has showers and toilets for its customers and visiting boat owners. It is possible on the flood tide to carry on a further 7 or 8 miles inland, but the channel becomes very narrow, generally but not always following the outsides of the bends. Stopping places are very limited and the tide runs very strongly. A dinghy is probably the best vehicle for exploration of these upper reaches.